This suggested topic was nervous control in humans. So let's have a look at what's going on. What we've got at the sort of top of this is that we need to talk about coordination. So if you think about your body, for example, you've got an awful lot of cells, okay? You have cells, you have tissues, you have organs. This is all built up into this one human being. But the thing is that at the same time as each cell is individual and has its own organelles and does its own things, everything must be coordinated. We don't want one cell doing one thing and another cell doing another thing. We want them to work together in a tissue. Then we want the tissues to work together. We want the organs to work together, the organ systems to work together, and everything sort of leads to one functioning organism. So we've got two systems whereby we get this control. One is your nervous system, and the other one is your hormonal system, your endocrine system. So to cover both of them in one little live lesson is a little bit much of a stretch. Nervous control on its own is actually 3 lessons in your course. So what I'm doing is I'm sort of highlighting some of the key points that you need to bear in mind as you're going through coordination. Okay, so we have established that movement and responses must be coordinated. So we're talking here about things that you decide to do and things that just happen, okay? It's all got to be coordinated and it's all got to work together. So what's quite important is that you understand this is not just things we choose to do, it's also things that happen in the background, okay? So what we're focusing on today is that those movement and responses that are coordinated by the nervous system, okay? So when we talk about our nervous system, okay, I am attempting to slow myself down by doing plenty of writing. So if I am talking too fast, then just let me know because I know I have a habit of doing so. So components of coordination and regulation. What do you need to be thinking about when you're thinking about these things? First thing is, we need sense organs. They need to detect that something is going on. Okay, so your skin can sense temperature, for example. You also have sense organs within your body that's detecting things. You have parts of your brain that's detecting temperature. You have parts of your brain detecting carbon dioxide concentration in your blood, for example. There's lots more of sense organs. It's not just your 5 senses that you learn about when you start learning about senses in primary school. Okay, so we have sense organs, which are detecting things that we need to respond to, that we need this coordination for. Then we have a sensory impulse. So it's all very well your skin knowing that the temperature is increasing or decreasing, but your skin has to tell your brain so your brain can then coordinate. Okay, so we have from the sense organ to the CNS. This is information transfer. Okay, so we've got it now to our central nervous system. We'll go into this in a bit more detail just now. Okay, but now it's great. Our central nervous system knows what's going on, but now we need to actually initiate that response. So this is where our motor impulse comes in. That goes from our central nervous system to what we call an effector. So again, this is an instructions transfer. So an effector is something that effects something. So a muscle, we want that muscle to contract and move your hand away from something. Okay, right? Last one, as we've just said, is your effector. So this is your glands, for example, even your muscles, for example, and they are carrying out the instruction. Right, so now we have an overview of what we're talking about when it comes to the nervous system and nervous control and coordination. So, next one we need to think about is a little bit more of the system overview. So in this case, we're getting a bit more technical. And remember, even if this is something you've come across before, you need to make sure that the level of technicality that you're using is appropriate for IGCSE. So you have definitely heard of, because I used it on the previous section, of the CNS. So your CNS equals your central nervous system. So the central nervous system is two things. It's your brain and your spinal cord. Okay, so you know that there's more to it than just the brain and the spinal cord, because you know you've got nerves throughout your body. These form part of what we call the PNS, which is the peripheral nervous system. So peripheral just means around the edges. So we've got the central nervous system, your brain and your spinal cord. Radiating out from that, we have more nerves. Okay, so these are nerves from CNS to the rest of the body. So nerves in your arms are part of your PNS. Nerves in your legs, part of your PNS, the peripheral nervous system. Whereas the nerves in your spinal cord, those are part of your central nervous system. The nerves in your brain, part of your central nervous system. Okay, now, whoopsie daisy, sorry. Now that we've got an idea of what sort of structure is, we need to have another think about how these messages are controlled and how they're sent. And we've got three different types of actions. Okay, we have voluntary actions. Just need to move something out of the way here. Okay, we have involuntary actions. And we have reflex actions. So when you come across these in your textbook and your lesson, they're sort of split into different places. But it's really important that you remember when you're doing your exam, you're not being tested on lesson 37, section 2. You're being tested on IGCSE Biology. So when you've got a topic that's spread over several lessons, it can really help to summarize it down and then reorganize it in a different kind of structure maybe that makes it have more sense to you and puts the things that are together. Okay, so voluntary actions. Well, if it's voluntary, you can do it by choice. So these ones are initiated in the brain. They are slower, and they are not automatic. They have to be learned. So for example, when I came into this room to do the Q&A, live lesson even, my skin sensed that the aircon was like crazy cold in here. So I had involuntary and reflex actions going on, but my voluntary action was, it's cold, I want to go get a jersey and I want to put it on. Okay, so I'm thinking about it. I've learned that when I'm cold, I can put more clothes on to warm up. So it's a slower response. We might not think of it as slower because it's still pretty instantaneous. Feel the aircon, put on a jersey, but it's initiated in your brain. Your skin doesn't tell you put on a jersey. Your brain tells you put on a jersey. Okay. When it comes to an involuntary action, these ones are automatic processes. They happen the exact same way every time. So they are invaried. And they are innate. This means that we don't have to learn them. We know them. When we're born, we know how to breathe. Our heart knows how to beat. Okay, all of these things just happen. We don't have to think about them. We don't have to learn them. They are involuntary. They keep us going, basically. Okay, so then our reflex actions are rather like an involuntary action, but they don't come through the brain. A reflex action goes simply just through the spinal cord. So these are direct response. It's an automatic response through the spinal cord. Okay, so involuntary actions and reflex actions are quite similar. But an involuntary action is something that comes from your brain. Okay, a reflex action just goes through your spinal cord. So it's a response to something. You touch the stove is the classic one. Touch the stove, it's hot, and you pull your hand away. That's a reflex action. Your nerves in your fingers didn't talk to your brain and say, oh, that's hot, and your brain says, oh, move your hand. It just went nerves to spinal cord and back to muscles, straight out, getting that reflex action to pull the arm away. Okay, so we have our central nervous system, we have our peripheral nervous system, we have voluntary actions, involuntary actions, and reflex actions. Right. Link to this. Is there not a reflex arc in the reflex actions? There is indeed. Okay, so the reflex arc is where we talk about sensory to spinal cord back to effective without going up to the brain. So I'm not sure when you came in, and I know there are a few people who came in a bit later, but what this is sort of a summary version of 3 lessons on nervous control, because there's not a chance I can fit 3 lessons into 1 half-hour session. Okay, so what we're doing is pulling out the key features, and then when you go into the lesson and you do your learning in the textbook, you'll get that deeper and a lot more detailed. Okay, there's a whole lot of diagrams that go with all of these things that you need to be familiar with. Okay, so that's all part of your lessons and your learning. So, right, that's our system. Let us now talk about nerve cells themselves. They seem to be a pretty key thing going on in here. Right, so nerve cells, you're going to come across them being called neurons. This is one of those American English, South African English, all sorts of different kind of English. Okay, what we tend to use for Cambridge is neurons, but be familiar with both of them. Sometimes it's simplified to a nerve cell. Okay, so when we're talking about neurons, they've got all the same basic structure. Okay, and that structure is made of 3 things. Okay, so our basic structure of a nerve cell is a cell body, a dendrite, and a nerve fiber. So you might see something that looks It's a good thing this is better for a drawing than a PDF because my drawings are still a bit dodgy. Okay. So again, as you go into the lessons, you're going to find out the specific structures that relate to the specific types of nerve cells, and it is something that you need to learn. Just to give you an overview now, this here is your nucleus, which makes this at the top your cell body. We have to have somewhere where we have our organelles. This is still a functioning cell, even though it looks really weird. Okay, these squiggly things, these are the dendrites. And this long piece here is the nerve fiber. So remember, when we're talking about a single cell, we're talking about a nerve fiber. When we talk about a nerve, we're talking about a whole bunch of nerve fibers all running together. Okay. So they all have the same basic structure. Who are they? We're going to do 3 types. We have the sensory neuron that we've already talked about a little bit. Okay, so this one travels from your sense organ to your CNS, central nervous system. And we don't say to your spinal cord, we don't say to your brain, because remember, different things are going to different places. So, sense organ to CNS. Second type is called a relay neuron. So, once we get to the CNS, we actually go from the sensory to the relay. So these guys live within the CNS and they connect the sensory to the motor. So that's why we call them a relay. Think about a relay passing a baton, right? As you run around in a circle. So these guys are passing the message, they're passing the information on from one type to another. Your third type, we've come across him already again in this session, is your motor neuron. So your motor neuron goes from your CNS now to your effector. Once that signal gets to the effector, then the effect happens, and then we have that response. So first you've got to realize that there is something to respond to. Then you've got to tell the body, oh, we need a response. Then your body's going to say, whoop, this is the response. Okay, so it's really important to remember here we have a one-way flow of information. So what we've got is that the messages are being passed along your nerve cells, encoded as electrical impulses. So there's quite funky ways in which this works, okay? But the cells are set up and the whole system is set up so that those impulses can only go in one single direction. So we don't have overlap, we don't have confusion about things going in the wrong direction. Just give me 2 seconds. Okay, I'm back. Right, so we were saying nerve cells have a one-way flow of information. So, all very well, we can understand sort of generally how this is going to move along one nerve cell, but the particular problem is going to be, how do we ensure one way from one nerve cell to the next? Because we're going from the sensory to the relay, from the relay to the motor. Okay, so, just give me 2 more seconds. Maybe Monday morning is not the best time to have a live lesson. Okay, all right, so carrying on, we have one last little section to look at while we do this, and that is how we ensure there's one way from one nerve cell to the next. Okay, so let us talk about the last piece of this recipe, the synapse. Okay, so if you want to talk about synapses, then you have to be clued up about your cell structure. Okay, because when we talk about synapses, we're talking about at the cellular detail. So if you skim through cell structure and now you want to understand synapse, go back and do some revision. Okay, so our synapse structure ensures that there is only ever a one-way flow of information. Remember that in biology, structure is always linked to function. So when you go and have a look at the structure of each of those different types of nerve cells, you're going to find, if you think about it, the different structures actually relate to the different functions of the nerve cells. So when it comes to a synapse, we are talking about something like this. And then on the other side, let's draw it like this. Okay, so nerve impulse is coming from this direction. Okay, and what we have in the synapse is vesicles full of neurotransmitter. And what we have on the other side are receptors on the cell membrane. This is really not drawn to scale. Okay, but it gives you an idea of what you're looking at. So what happens when this impulse arrives is that one of these, whoa, I didn't want to undo the whole thing. Okay, right, that's a bit sad. All I wanted to do, whoops. Okay, we'll get there in the end, ladies and gentlemen. Let's bring him back. Let's draw. Okay, fingers crossed. Third time lucky. Okay. One of these vesicles is going to fuse with the cell membrane. And what's going to happen is the neurotransmitter is then released into your synaptic cleft. Okay, so the neurotransmitter is released, and of course this is happening with more than one dodgy drawn vesicle, okay? There's lots of these things happening. So what we want to do is understand that when we fill the synaptic cleft with neurotransmitter, it's going to then bind to the receptors on the other side. And when you bind to a receptor on a cell membrane, then you have a knock-on effect of all sorts of things that then happen. So what effect they have is going to depend on what they're talking to. So this could be a sensory neuron to a relay neuron, for example, in which case we would then stimulate this nervous impulse to carry on. If it's relay to motor, same thing. If it's a motor neuron to a muscle, then we're not going to stimulate the same kind of response that we've been having in these other connections. We would then be stimulating a muscular contraction. So it's all the synapses are working in the same way, but the effect they have differs between who's on the other side. Okay, so that there is your neurotransmitter. Some technical terms when you get to this piece again. But again, remember, learn your technical terms and make sure you can spell them correctly. All right, so that then pretty much covers everything from those 3 lessons. So when you go into the lesson, you're going to get a lot more detail, of course.